everyone. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm your host, Deb Philman. At The Reason We Learn, we aspire to be part of the solution. The purpose of this show is to take a good, honest, potentially painful look at the way kids are being educated. We know we can do better, and this is where we'll talk about how. Let's learn something. Hi, everybody. Welcome to The Reason We Learn. I'm so glad you're here today. If you are new to this channel and interested in being part of the solution to our education crisis in America, I hope you will subscribe to be notified when I make new content. Please also go ahead and like and share this broadcast so others can benefit from the information we're about to share. I have an interview today for you that I think will be surprising and hopefully inspire a lot of hope in you and get you excited about something that maybe you hadn't thought about before. And that is summer camp. As you know, each of the shows that I bring to you, each of the interviews, is about people who are working to improve the lives of children, improve their education any way they can. Today's is no exception. I have Peter Slovenski with me. He's the owner and director of Slovenski Camps. Peter is a 1979 graduate of Dartmouth College who majored in English. He's also a 1980 graduate of Stanford, where he received a master's in educational administration. He spent 34 years as the head coach of track and field at Bowdoin College, and the past 35 years directing summer camps. And it's a family affair now, wife, sons, everybody's involved in these wonderful summer camps in Maine. And I met him, I shouldn't say met, we were introduced over the phone by a mutual friend who said we should talk because apparently we had some similar ideas about what was helpful for kids' lives. And when we had our first phone conversation, I started thinking about my own summer camp experience. Those of you who follow the channel or follow me know that my own childhood was not so awesome. I grew up in New York City. It was an urban, experience. I had a lot of great opportunities, but I wouldn't exactly say that my family home life was that fantastic. And yet my dad sent me to summer camp, to overnight camp in the Adirondacks. And I would say, without question, my years at summer camp were the best experiences I had as a child that made my childhood. I think back to some of the less than optimal things that were happening, bullying in school, trouble doing well with my grades until I, stopped getting bullied in school and went away to private school. But summer camp changed it. Summer camp got me out of my head. Summer camp got me outside and running around. I was always an athlete, but once you're home and once you're in school, it's like, I derived so much mental health benefit from summer camp and learned so much about life and myself and other people that I can honestly say it shaped me more than any other educational experience. And so I got to thinking, why don't more people send their kids to summer camp now? And Peter and I talked about it, and I invited him to come here and talk to you about why we think you should. You should consider it. You should save for it instead of college even. And so without further ado, I would like to introduce you to Peter Slovenski, and we're going to have a conversation about summer camp culture and why it should be something on your to-do list to include for your child. Hi, Peter.
Hello, Deb. Great to be talking with someone else who also...
I think you're frozen.
Yeah, such wonderful memories, and we learn so much. It's a fantastic environment for learning skills, specific skills like paddling a canoe or chopping wood. But the standards of camp life, where the parents aren't around, and learning how to be self-reliant and cabin cleanup and clean up in the dining hall and make your way from one activity to another. It's so mental toughness, and I'm glad you had that experience too.
Absolutely. When we were talking on the phone, you were the one who used the term camp culture, summer camp culture. And I never thought of it that way, but it really is a separate culture. It's very different from school. And at the same time, it's different from home. It's sort of like a little bit more like college, but minus the academics. Like, you don't have the pressure and the academics. But as you said, being away from home, it's not your parents telling you to clean up your room. It's not, there's an independence, but with supervision. And it's caring supervision, but it's not the touchy-feely, loving kind of, you still, there are boundaries that are appropriate. So I learned anyway, to respect reasonable authority, the kind of authority that makes sense for your safety. You're swimming, you're canoeing, you're horseback riding, you're doing archery, you're doing potentially dangerous things. So when adults are setting boundaries and rules, this makes sense. So for me, it's not like I had a permissive childhood, but there just weren't all that many opportunities to bump into, hey, there are dangerous things in life and you need to pay attention to some of the rules and you need to pay attention to other people and yourself. And when let's say I went at like 8. So I don't know the ages that most people go, but it was perfect for me. It was absolutely the perfect time, because when I came back home for my first year at camp, I didn't have to be told to do a lot of things. And I didn't have to be told not to do a lot of things, because again, I got it. Like, it made sense. Right.
We get that feedback a lot from parents, that they see and appreciate the growth that has happened with their children, and it's in very positive ways that parents can't always teach their kids, but 18-year-old high school kids who are the cabin counselors and good role models, they're the ones teaching the children, and it's a better and in a lot of ways more effective education. It's like those are mentors. And another comparison I'd make that fits in with what you just described. So I was a coach for a long time, and I always enjoyed sports. Summer camp culture, it mixes in more of the kind of sports culture and sports leadership that's very positive for children, with like direction and drills and referees, and also things like awards and praise and attention for when you do the right thing. So a lot of the hours at camp are spent with these really good mentors, really good role models who aren't your parents. And they're not teachers. They're living in amongst you, and they're closer to your age. And another phrase I would include. My memories of summer camp include a lot of humor, and so yes, including humor in with the instruction, the education, and even the discipline. I find summer camp is brilliant at that.
Yep. And I distinctly remember when back in the day, one of the things that would happen is the representative from a camp might actually come to your home. If the parents wanted to meet with the kid and the parents and meet the director or somebody from the camp. And I remember the representative from the camp I went to coming to our home, and my dad introducing me and saying, oh, when I was 8 years old, here, meet this person. And we're talking about sending you to a summer camp. And I remember thinking, like, why? I was horrified, absolutely horrified. We're going to sleep overnight someplace out my house. Like, what? I was completely freaked out. This sounded like an absolute nightmare. And my dad told me, he said, I am concerned that, as much as I love that you love to read books and you're a quiet kid and all this, I loved sports. But I was not social. I was what you might even call antisocial. I was very introverted, and my social skills were less than awesome. I would blurt things out. I could be kind of rude. I just wasn't very good with kids my own age. And he said, this will be good for you. You'll get out with kids your own age and you'll be running around and doing stuff. I was terrified. So as I'm sitting here sharing with everyone my fabulous, wonderful memories of camp, I don't want it to sound like it was a no-brainer. When they dropped me off with my trunk full of stuff, I was beside myself, instantly homesick. Oh my God, what's going to happen? It did not even take 24 hours. And I know that sounds extreme, but something happened. Like you said, the counselors are good at this. They're used to this. The other kids, there were some kids who'd been there before, some who hadn't, were just like me. So we were in the same boat, and they just knew they were prepared for this situation. And they got us immediately active. We're going to go do a thing. And now we're going to do another thing. And we're going to do this, so I didn't have time to stop and think about how homesick I was. And within 24 hours, I was like, I never want to leave. Can I come back again next year? It didn't take long at all.
How long was your summer camp session that you feared going into it? How long was it going to be?
Well, that was the thing. I could have stayed for 7 weeks. Initially, my dad said, go for a week. You know, we sort of hope you'll stay. And now, of course, I didn't learn until many years later why, because my parents were working on separating. So, you know, but if it was really miserable, you have to give it a week, he said. That's not, you can't go for a night and come home. You must give it a week. And if at the end of the week you are still absolutely miserable, I will come and get you myself. So I thought, okay, I can do that. I'll just cry for a week and then I'll come home, right? And I figured, I was telling him like the next day, I actually went to my counselor and said, could you please get in touch with my dad and tell him I'm staying? Like, don't come get me. Now there was a parents, you know, visiting weekend thing halfway through where they came up to visit me, but I could not have been more proud of everything I showed them when they came. It was like, and then I did this and we went over here and, you know, 8-year-old kid, and I'm directing my parents like all over the place. And my dad's looking at me like, who are you? And what have you done with my daughter? But it really, it transformed me more than my school ever could. And I was in public school at that time.
Right. There's in addition to all the things people will learn at summer camp that are connected to body and mind, and schools do pretty well at that too, body and mind. What camps have built right in, and they do a wonderful they do a wonderful job of including it into the experience, is camp is body, mind, and spirit. It's not just body and mind. So the kind of things you were noticing, things like friendship and the support you received, and the fun and the humor, a lot of those are spiritual qualities that aren't as possible with schools or classrooms. And you know, another thing you're describing that camps do very well, if you look at ski jumpers or high divers, you would think, well, how do you learn to do that? It looks so dangerous. But ski jumpers and divers, you start off on lower boards and you start off with low diving and low ski jumping, small jumps. Summer camps are great at that, helping kids make progress, but starting at really low levels in all sorts of things, being away from home, cleaning up, the skills in swimming, activities around summer camp. And then by the end, as there's usually a progression of recognition or levels where the kids get a little more praise each time they do something. And then you end up being able to do something like ski jumping or high diving, because the summer camp counselors and staff have helped you get out, unpack your stuff from your car where you don't have some of the mental grit to or the skills to participate in some of camp life. They have ways that get you moving into the process that are very friendly for beginners and for new kids. And that's another thing I think camps really excel at, helping you get to a place that's actually pretty bold, but doing it incrementally and starting with instruction for beginners.
Absolutely. And I think there are activities you do at camp too that you really wouldn't get the opportunity to do at home. So things like in the camp I went to was on a working farm, as an example. And there I was in a New York City area. I wasn't exactly going to learn about, you know, farm animals and animal husbandry and picking weeds in a garden and, you know, all this kind of stuff. So I got a, you know, up close look at where my food came from. So that was kind of cool. And just the physical labor of you're up with the sun and you're off to take care of these animals, and you learn what farmers do, and that was part of camp. Now, other camps do sports. I also went later in my early teens because I was a soccer player, which was soccer camp. So that was a different kind of camp. But the things that they had in common were you have a schedule. There are things you need to do. You have some choice within the schedule. Most summer camps give you some options of, you know, to this or that, you know, sports or different things, or this before that. And then, you know, so you get some reasonable choices, but within certain categories. And as you said, you learn skills, you get outside. The day starts early, ends after dark. Usually you might have a bonfire or some kind of a dinner, and then maybe some kind of game or sing along or some kind of activities, sometimes quiet, sometimes a little more raucous afterwards, but you go to bed tired. Like one thing I remember was you hit that bed and it's like, boom, you are out. And so you talk about the mind body. I remember so well feeling that tremendous feeling of satisfaction that I lived this day. This day was a full day, and I am tired and I can go to sleep, and you're not lying there in bed tossing and turning and anxiety going through your head. You don't have time for that. So in terms of childhood mental health being, I personally think, too much time and rumination on things you can't change, don't really understand, and probably shouldn't be thinking so much about. You don't do that. You're outside your head. You're doing things. You're busy. You're making friends. You're learning skills. And at the end of the day, every muscle in your body has been used. You've used energy. You've breathed in air, clean air generally. And it's such a satisfying experience that I found myself then, when I came back from camp, looking for those opportunities in my life during the year. So before we came on the show, Peter and I were talking, and I mentioned that in thinking about some of the struggles that kids are having today in school, parents are having with their kids, I think summer camp is a great antidote. Even if it's only 1 week in the summer, it still can give the child that perspective. I think perspective is the key word here, where they know the difference. So if there's something in school, it's like, this is darn boring. They're like, I need to get outside. I need to run around. I need to go continue to pursue that sport that I liked, or something else physical, because I felt really good doing that, and this doesn't feel so good. So they're more self-motivated. I certainly was. I became so much more motivated to play sports, organized sports during the school year after summer camp than before. So my dad was trying to get me involved in sports when I was real little, and I'm like, I want my books. Not doing it. Went to summer camp, and now I was like, all right, I need a team. Let's go. Where's the team? And it worked. It absolutely worked.
Deb, another way it works is, this wasn't true when you and I were in school, but currently a lot of kids are ending up connected to devices and screens and cell phones. And what they don't recognize that the brain circuits and their habits for life are being affected by this interaction with the technology and the screens. So what summer camp is, it's a wonderful opportunity to help the brain rewiring in ways that are looking for fresh air, for activity, for conversation, and getting away from screens. Screens are kind of addictively drawing the children toward them, and it's not great for mental health. It's not great for the learning to use your brain in so many different ways, like how to get from here to there. If you don't always have a GPS that's going to tell you, you got to learn how to get from here to there, and seeing people along the way, and activity options where you go from 1 hour to the next the whole day, and you're not bumping into technology at all. And that's really healthy for children's brains. And 1 week of summer camp goes a long way toward doing that. You made the point of how summer camp, which might have been 3 or 7 weeks of your summer, it stayed with you all year. That's another thing we hear from parents that's really positive and fun to hear is they'll describe how we talk about summer camp all year, they'll say. And in the children's minds, things that they learned, things that they enjoyed, friendships, stories, adventures, activities, skills, those are in there, and they do, in a really positive way, surface throughout the rest of the year. So an investment in a week or two of summer camp, it'll reverberate throughout the year for children, and you'll hear that. And as a summer camp director, I hear that from the families, and that's a really positive thing, a really positive reason to give your children some summer camp experiences.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I know that there are people watching and listening to this who might think, oh God, that's outside my reach financially. I can't send them to summer camp. That's something that, rich people do, whatever. I think people are they're well, first of all, they're wrong. But what do you have to say to people to help them understand that that's not accurate, that that's just a perception, perhaps gleaned from movies or who knows where that's come from, but it's not actually true. While there are certainly some summer camps that are very, very expensive, that's not necessarily the norm.
No, there's a very healthy tradition of summer camping for middle income and even low income families through institutions like YWCAs, YMCAs, Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts, churches. There are a lot of camps that are affordable. And I would go a little further and say, there may be some sacrificing that you might have to do to register a child for a summer camp. It might take some sacrifices, but the sacrifices are worth it, and it's the kind of investment in your children's mental health and your children's abilities and skills that make it a really smart thing to sacrifice for. If saving money in some other areas and spending money on summer camps is something that you get to think about, I think the sacrifices are worth it, and then you'll find affordable options.
Right, right. I was just searching around today and I found that the Department of Defense has summer camps for military kids that they may not, family of military members may not even realize that these exist. So those exist. And then, of course, the Y camps that you mentioned, then lots of churches and organizations have camps. I think the important thing, though, to your point, is if you're thinking about what should I save money for? So, if your kids are very young, for example, and you're thinking college, you're thinking, I've got to start a college fund. Or, as I said in the intro, I genuinely believe that saving up for camp, if that's something, so that you could say to your children, for example, at whatever age you think they're old enough to go, you can go from now until you age out and become a counselor. And the money is there to go so that when they love it, because they will, you don't have to say no after 1 year, right? You can continue to say yes. Just like I said, I went to my camp, the first camp I went to for 3 years, and it was the perfect place for me for the first 3 years. And then I became much more of a serious athlete. So I wanted the specific camp for my, my sports, soccer and tennis. And I found a camp in Canada that had both, and I could go do that. And it was otherwise the same camp culture. Just my whole day was playing soccer and playing tennis. And then, but in between those two, I also had a camp where I wanted to learn to speak French better. My dad found a camp where we do everything in French. So sports, whatever, but we're speaking French all day long. And I got to go to another part in the country. And so, but there was never a time where they said no, because of money. And again, these were not luxury camps. It's just that the money was saved up for the camp because they felt like camp is important and it was bringing me out of my shell. So as opposed to college, where a lot of parents save for college, your child may or may not want to go. And increasingly, I'm hoping parents are letting their children make that decision, that it's not an automatic. And as you said, it's an investment. It's an investment. You want a happy kid who's disconnected, unplugged for a certain amount of time each year, and who gets outside, runs around, gets fresh air, makes good friends, and develops independence. Those skills, like you said, taking care of yourself and cleaning your own room and so forth. I think that summer camp is the place to put the money. That's my 2 cents. I mean, other people may disagree, but that's what I think.
There's another attractive element to summer camps, which is the different people who are comfortable at summer camp. It does range from the shyest kids to the most outgoing kids, and they all enjoy this wonderful culture that gets them mixed into cabins and mixed into activities. And the quiet kids kind of learn sometimes to gain a little confidence to speak up, and the loud kids, the peer feedback or counselor feedback sometimes gets them to be a little bit less less dominating of conversations, or to be a little less loud. And if you have a child who's shy, if you have a child who's a little too outgoing, the camp staff and the camp culture, I find it's really good at helping kids that maybe talk a little too much, learn to listen to others and be a little more patient. And it's also a really terrific place for kids who are shy to be respected for being quiet and shy, but to gradually gain confidence and see how you interact with people, and to improve the people skills that might help them in other ways by being a little less shy.
Yeah. That brings up a funny story. The camp I went to first had rest time, like rest hour after lunch.
Right.
And you were supposed to be we slept in those Girl Scout tents that had, like, the sides that roll up and all that. And so you weren't supposed to be out of your tent. Like, no matter what, you had to spend the time in there. You could read quietly. You couldn't make noise because you'd be disturbing other people, and you couldn't leave. You couldn't be wandering around. And of course, you know what happens. You've got a bunch of 8, 9, and 10-year-olds. They're going to try to figure out ways to communicate with each other and their friends in the next tent. You're like, how can we do this without anyone finding out? And you mentioned the kids who talk too much. So I never had a problem being quiet because that was my natural way of being. And I loved rest hour because I was reading my Nancy Drew books. I brought almost all of them in my trunk. So I was plowing through Nancy Drew. But there was a girl in my tent, Sophie, super funny, like one of the funniest people I've ever met in my life. But she was a chatterbox, and she just wouldn't stop. And it got her busted. What happened was, one day, one of the counselors, she was making trouble and trying to sneak around and did all these things. And the rest of us couldn't really stop her. We were just kind of like, you're going to get in trouble. You're going to get in trouble. And thankfully they didn't have this whole group punishment thing. It was very much, you did the thing, you do, the punishment. So you couldn't be anywhere you wanted. So they put her on a rock, sort of like a little rock in the middle of the circle of tents. She had to stand on the rock in her socks, like, just as she was. That's where you're standing for the rest of rest hour. So she just stood there. And I remember looking out at the tent, and they're standing there, and it started to drizzle. And they said, no, that's where you stay. And she's standing there, and she's standing there. So God bless her. She's like doing this and doing this. And we're all in there trying to stop laughing. So memory I will carry to the grave, right? But she never made noise again. She never made noise again during rest hour. So we all got a little laugh, and she got a punishment that made sense. And she learned, maybe I better shut my mouth and stop trying to sneak out of the tent. But it was all done without a whole lot of drama. It was just like, well, Sophie, we warned you. Here you go.
And Deb, I want to make a point about summer camp standards, because that's a terrific story about that a girl heard the standards, crossed the lines, and she had some consequences. Well, I find summer camps, you need to do some research on the kind of camp you're going to. You want to get a little bit of a sense that the values of the camp, the principles of the camp, the standards of the camp are a good match for your family. But I will give you this encouraging observation. I think camp culture tends to be a few things like eternal and true across party lines, and it doesn't matter if your family is left, right, center, or anything. The standards are kind of timeless standards that camps have retained and keep in an apolitical manner for the education and the supervision of children. And they tend to be very safe. They're very big on safety. There will be consequences for, you hear the rules about safety, and you can't cross those lines. But in a lot of standards, like related to something like bullying or teasing or making noise at rest hour, or arguing with referees, they have a lot of quick, good responses from, again, like 18-year-old referees or summer camp cabin counselors, and they have a nice way of pushing for these standards about hard work and grit and not complaining and not teasing and not bullying others. There's often humor included to help the standard be something that people can learn through humor as well as through consequences. But camps have terrific standards, and it's like that when you're homeschooling children. I think a good advantage of that is a parent is there to see what's going on and to guide the parent's child. But another very valuable experience is for these children who have been guided by parents to start moving out to where they're going to be more independent and get guided by some others. And these are pretty safe, trustworthy, reliable guides and mentors that can help parents teach the children the kind of things parents are already trying to teach about hard work and being and not complaining and being mentally tough and helping others, supporting others, doing unto others as we would have them do unto us. Summer camp has got a lot of eternal, timeless qualities like that. And I think you'll find, I think the schools have become more politicized, and they use academic subjects a lot of times as cover to get political points in there. Summer camp, you're learning to paddle canoes and hike and swim. They don't mix up politics with the standards. The standards are.
It's pretty hard to do with paddle the canoe in a very inclusive way. If the person's not paddling, they're going to go in a circle. So it's not really going to, you either paddle or you don't paddle. And so, but that brings up a point that you've made, which is that they experience human nature up close in ways they don't necessarily get a chance to do in the school environment. You are out in nature more, literally. You are engaged in some more competitive activities, even if they're not heavy duty, hardcore competitive, there's still some healthy competition going on. And just in terms of even in your bunk, going to bed, waking up, who's sleeping where, who's in the shower first, second, third, you get an up close look at how human beings actually function when there are limited resources, when you're in line for the food, for example, and you got, two different kinds of dessert maybe, and then one is a little more scarce and who's grabbing for it. Now, these are things that are real life. That's real life. Not everything is equally distributed perfectly. Not everybody wins the prize. Not everybody comes in first in the race. And in addition to learning that sportsmanship, you learn human nature, how people react to that, you mentioned generosity and gratitude and frustration, all the kinds of feelings no one can pull the wool over your eyes that everyone will share once we're all perfect, because that's what we'll do. We'll be perfect people and we'll all equally share. You go to summer camp and summer camp says, really? Okay. Have fun with that. In a good way, in a healthy, gentle way, not in a mean way.
Right. Another benefit to getting connected to summer camps is that starting off in junior counselor or counselor in training programs later in the middle teenage years, like 15 or 16, those are terrific starter jobs. And that when people get to be 17, 18, 19, and are still working at camps or start working at camps at those ages, I've made an observation to them that I think is an important way to look at working at summer camps. It's that a lot of the colleges and career tracks encourage internships. So people will try to get internships in banking or a law office or in a hospital. And I tell our counselors, you're having a more important internship this summer. You're going to learn how to be parents. And so they're learning how to put kids to bed, learning how to establish standards, learning how to sacrifice for children, and then gradually expect and teach the children to start making sacrifices as well. Summer camp work with a cabin full of campers and then teaching them how to swim or how to play the different games in the fields, leading them on hikes. It's a fantastic internship in becoming parents. And I think a lot of our college student graduates who have been interning in banks, they don't know how to handle children if and when they become parents.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And even honestly, that you'll also have a fair number of people who, let's say, go to college and live at home, or they go to school and they're in college, but it's very much a, like they're in the dorm, and it's still not quite the same as being at camp. So I would say this is especially good for the kids who didn't get to go to camp. It'd be like the perfect job, because you're going to get, a little bit of both. But for those who did go to camp, even, I think it's, as you point out, it's a great opportunity to learn that sense of responsibility, and while being outside and not being stuck in an office. And a lot of the skills I genuinely think would be transferable anyway. You have to have patience to work in any office. You have to be able to get along with a lot of different kinds of people of all different ages. You probably need to be able to plan some things and execute some things effectively. You have to be able to learn from your mistakes. You have to be able to clean up mess. I don't know of a single job that it wouldn't benefit from the skills of a camp counselor.
Right. Yeah, and the other thing with the work of being a camp counselor, it's very much like a liberal arts job. It's not over specialization. Our counselors will spend some time cleaning dishes, other times teaching dodgeball, and other times leading a kayak trip or a hike. And there's physical labor, physical activity involved, but they also got to think a lot. Something in the cabin chemistry isn't quite right. What can they do? Their leadership is going to be. They know that their leadership affects the chemistry of the team in the cabin, and they got to figure out how to make better chemistry in the cabin. And these two kids don't get along, or these two kids are they're so close they exclude the others. And there's just a lot of great ways in which a summer camp day requires you to use your whole being, the kind of things that the liberal arts would stand for: a little bit of philosophy, a little bit of psychology, a little bit of engineering. And throughout a day, camp counselors have to practice and learn a lot of good skills with a lot of good people skills.
Yeah. And just as camp is very welcoming to lots of different temperaments and kinds of kids, I think the same can be said of counselors. So in other words, you have to be good at the things that are required of you as a counselor, but you don't necessarily, not every camp counselor has to be, yay, let's go. There's room for the more cerebral camp counselor, a quieter person. There's room for the person who's super sporty. There's room for the person who's just a great manager or a people person, or, that kind of thing. So, and the counselors too, I remember one of the things I remember most fondly about camp, especially the sports camp I went to, was the interaction of the counselors with each other was its own role modeling. So when they would collectively lead activities, so they'd all be together, and then we'd see them interacting with each other as they were leading us. And I started picking up on their different personalities, how they complemented each other, how they got along, how they resolved, issues with their different bunks, different things happening. I remember that. I remember thinking like, wow, that's really cool. You look up to them. Right. As a kid, I definitely looked up to my camp counselors. These are people that I could take a lesson from them and how to get along with others. So if I were interviewing in any business and somebody had on their resume camp counselor, that would be very high on my list of, pluses for that person, because that means, especially if they came also with recommendations from a camp director, this is a special person who's done a lot of different things and negotiated, planned, organized, executed all of the things in one activity.
Yeah. And as role models, a terrific value of camp is our counselors will have that range of abilities and personalities that you just described. And some of them are very motivated about music, and we have campfires in places where they see counselors performing music. And a lot of them are considering taking musical instrument lessons, and they'll see a counselor playing the guitar or playing the trumpet or playing the saxophone, and they can see a good role model there. And the same thing, obviously, with sports or, school comes up enough that you can tell the counselors are motivated about studying and school as well. There's the rest hour reading period that you mentioned. At our camp, we have every night the kids get in bed by 9, and then the counselor reads to them. We read classics. We don't read any new books. The counselors don't get to choose the books. We have a curriculum of Mark Twain and Charles Dickens and Louisa May Alcott books, and the counselors read, so the campers fall asleep while being read to. But it's again, when you read when you fall asleep and you're listening to Tom Sawyer or Alice in Wonderland, there's a kind of a little bit of a connection to there's a way in which things we learn in school, reading and things we do in school, is also part of the adventure of summer camp and of life. So there's good connections to see these role models as people who are active, somewhat. Some of them are athletic, some of them are artistic. There's arts and crafts, and we have some performing arts, and so a lot of great role models at the right age. Because if your children are 10 or 12, they can see themselves soon becoming 18 or 20, whereas parents are role models of a different kind, being quite a bit older than the children, and the kids have a long way to go between being children and being parents. But the way they go, the long way to go includes being teenagers and high school students or students of those ages. And it's really interesting, and it makes a great impression on these kids to watch the counselors working. And you mentioned too, human nature. The kids can see why either some of the older campers or counselors are more widely respected, highly admired, and popular. And those traits, being supportive of others, being generous, being thoughtful, being witty, or being someone who knows a bunch of skills, the kids kind of see that and say, well, yeah, if I want to have that kind of connection with people and making friends the way you do in those activities, I can see those are the things I want to start thinking about. Being a person who's known for being generous, a person who's known for being witty, or whatever. Just a lot of good character traits and role models at summer camp.
Yeah, I'd agree. So in the time we have left, I want to ask you, what would you recommend to families who maybe they had considered it, maybe they haven't considered it, but now they're thinking, okay, this sounds fantastic, I want to do it, but how do I find the right camp? Where do I start? Should my child go to camp close to home? Should I consider camps that are on the other side of the country? Like I said, I did both. I did camps that were reasonably close to home, and then I went to one that was out in the San Juan Islands of Washington State, and I loved that experience. It was amazing, but I was already 12 years old. So, right, 8, 12, big difference.
Right,
so
right.
What would you say? How would you advise people?
The way most people find summer camps, a lot of camps will attempt to do a little advertising, but what you realize with camp advertising is when it comes to sending children away overnight, word of mouth is going to be more effective and more important. So chatting with other parents and reaching out to other parents online, maybe about options locally or within an easy drive. The internet is fantastic for the kind of specialty camps that you mentioned, where you can fly to another region or fly a couple states away and find a camp that has some kind of theme that is interesting to you, your family, and to your child. So a combination of internet and word of mouth, I would recommend, is how you get started.
Right. So now, one of the things I wanted to do is I wanted to bring up, share the screen and show the website for your camp, just to give people, a view. So this is your website, and I noticed that you actually explain your camp philosophy right there on the site, and it goes through all the, what a day of camp is like and why you have it this way, and you even included the children's mental health section. Can you explain a little bit about why you have that there? Because I know I mentioned it at the beginning of the show, but wanted to get your take.
Right. So in the first years of running summer camps, I thought people were most interested in hearing some of the clinical information about activities. But then I noticed over the course of my 35 years in summer camps that philosophy was also very important to families and parents. Some would prefer a place that might be child-centered, and others would prefer a place where it was a little more old school, old-fashioned, where the coaches and the teachers were and the adults were leading things more. So I thought the philosophy was important. Ever since 2020 with the pandemic, but also because of my work with college students who have a lot of mental health challenges, I think, I decided it was important for people to take a look at our approach to children's mental health and how some of the pop culture ideas about raising children might be things that we wouldn't agree with in terms of what's best for children's mental health. That we think, like the example of your story where the girl got asked to stand on or sit on a rock for the rest of the period. Those are the kind of, I think, good, memorable consequences that are really good for children. They're good for the children who get the consequence, and they're good for the other children who see the consequence. And I think it's good to know that our camp thinks those kind of things are good for children, but other camps may be more clear in terms of how they wouldn't raise their voices at children, or might have another approach to child raising and to teaching children. So you want to look at the philosophies of the camps, and I put children's mental health in there because I think that's a big thing of. I think some of the reason children had as much trouble with the pandemic as they did is how they were being raised leading up to that point, and being a little too dependent and not being allowed to or encouraged to or helped to become stronger, tougher mentally, to be able to handle a little bit of adversity or a lot of adversity. And so we like to describe some of those things that we've seen affecting the culture of children in American schools and American pop culture.
Right. I noticed you even mentioned like helps children enjoy childhood. What a concept, right? And I try to tell parents this all the time. It's so short. Childhood is so short. And, the grit and the determination and all that should come from actually doing things, not putting up with things. So I'll hear parents a lot of times say, well, the fact that school's kind of boring and that's a rite of passage and you have to do it. And I'm like, no, I don't think that putting up with things is what makes you, resourceful or resilient. I think overcoming challenges, dealing with adversity, healthy adversity, not, scary, traumatic kind of adversity. Like I'm worried I'm going to get beat up and shoved in a locker by the school bully. And summer camp doesn't put up with that, right? I mean, you're free to send someone home if they're that violent, they don't get to stay. Right. And so I think, between having individual reward and consequence, seeing what you are capable of, which generally is a lot more than you thought when you got to camp, whether it's physically or mentally or emotionally. And you come away from that, I think, mentally healthier, because I genuinely believe a lot of childhood mental health is where expectations and reality clash in terms of what I expect reality to deliver for me or be, and what it actually is. And when your expectations don't match that, you get very upset. Or if you're getting lots of negative about you or the world, where do you go with that? You're a kid. You can't control it. You can have small bits of control at camp. I'm going to go canoeing. I can make the canoe go forward. I can make the canoe turn. I can play capture the flag and run around with my friends, and maybe we win and maybe we don't, but we had a good time. So the things that you're focusing on are within your locus of control. And then sometimes they're just ever so slightly out of it, but reachable. And I think that that's the kind of experience that builds your sense of confidence and competence.
Yes. And I'll point out 3 types of mental health challenges that I saw in the college ranks that start when the poor college students were children. There's too much. They're having a lot of trouble with perfectionism. There's a lot of trouble with anxiety and trouble with depression. And these are things that when I was growing up it wasn't just that they didn't know about them. It's that there really wasn't much of that. There wasn't much time for it, and the way children were raised didn't promote it. Perfectionism, we think it's important to watch out for pressing kids to be too good or to and to not like enjoy things, but to be overly competitive and kind of summer camp is great at helping people do a lot of things well, and it doesn't push them too much to be perfect at things. It's a lot do a lot of things well and take pride in that. And then the anxiety and the depression, we use Gandhi's quotes often at camp that the myth of the atomic age is that you can improve the world, and the reality of life is you can improve yourself. So we spend a lot of time helping kids figure ways to maybe do things better themselves, and not worry. They don't have to worry. They shouldn't worry about changing the world or improving the world when they're 11 years old.
I could not agree more. If we could just take that pressure off of these kids instead of the world's coming to an end in 12 years because of climate change, that's pretty daunting. So getting them reconnected with what they can do, and like you said, changing themselves, I think is really important. So any final thoughts you would like to share, other than I want everyone to know who's watching or listening that I will put the link to the Slovenski camps in the description down below. So if you are in the Northeast in particular, these camps are in Maine, you can, I would highly recommend that you check them out. But also if you're not in the Northeast, do look for similar camps. But is there anything you would like to add that we haven't discussed?
Just the last thing of how, and I think you experienced it too, is that children gain confidence and gain toughness, I think, by learning to do things. And summer camps, it's such a wonderful array of activities, from archery and dodgeball to knitting and chess. All these great activities, and they have different periods where they can do a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and that's a great part of childhood. And as they grow older and have more and more of these kind of skills, that helps them navigate life successfully with confidence and with a lot of success. So I think summer camp was just as you said, it was the best educational experience you had. I think a lot of summer camp alumni feel the same way. Summer camp was the best experience of our lives for learning how to grow up and be well-adjusted adults.
I agree. And I genuinely believe for those parents out there who are worried because you don't see another avenue to staying in the school district you're in, or the specific type of school experience that you have for your children, this can go so far to improve that. It really can. Your children have a lot more personal power than you might realize, as do you. And summer camp can help with that. So that's kind of the last thing I want to say is please consider sending your kids to summer camp. So with that, I want to thank you so much, Peter. This has been fantastic. I greatly appreciate you spending the time to talk to us about your camps and about camp in general. And if anyone has any further questions about this or wants to get a hold of Peter, like I said, follow the links down below or get in touch with me and we'll get connected. Thanks, everybody.